contagion will continue to spread. Lastly, the New York Times reports, interviews show Chinese Americans or those perceived to be Chinese or Chinese American are being yelled at, spit upon, and physically assaulted. A letter from the National Council of Asian Pacific Americans to Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House. In their opening comments, they state, "We urge you to call for unity and publicly denounce the increase of racist attacks and discrimination against the Asian community in the wake of the rising concerns of the Corona 2019 virus, COVID-19. We have the opportunity today to take part in a nationwide conversation around racism and violence against our Asian community. We are so happy to welcome our panelists on today, and I will take the opportunity to introduce them at this time. First, we have Yujie Huang, Teaching and Learning Innovation Faculty Consultant for Inclusive Teaching. Next, we have Jiang, President of the Chinese Students and Scholars Association. Our community partner, Alizza Punzalan, Randle, Chief Executive Officer of the YWCA. Next, Kelly Rubin, Associate Dean of Students here at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. We next have Dr. Chi Sun, Associate Professor, Educational Psychology and Counseling. Also, Doug Terry, Teaching Associate, English Language Institute. Again, thank you to all of our panelists for being with us on today. Just a few reminders. First of all, for our panelists, we would like to ask that you would please remember to announce yourself before you respond to a question. And also, please keep your comments to 3 or 4 minutes. To our audience, should you have a question during the discussion, please be sure to share it during the Q&A segment of this discussion. Our panelists will try hard to make sure to respond to those. Let's get started with our discussion. This question is to be answered by each of our panelists. And Alizza, our community partner, we're going to start with you today. If someone witnesses biased behavior or a racist incident, how should they respond?
Thank you. My name is Alizza Punzalan Randle, and I'm the CEO of YWCA Knoxville and the Tennessee Valley. So let me intro the YW just a tad. Our mission is eliminating racism, empowering women, and we take it a little further to say promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And we truly mean that, and we're very mission driven. So this question for us, it's really assess the situation, assess where you are. You never want to put yourself at risk. So if you're in your grocery store where you shop weekly, maybe these days, maybe it's bi-weekly, versus whether you're out in a public setting that you're unfamiliar with, you always need to assess the situation. If you're by yourself or if you're with a person, there's always power in numbers. But really, you need to think about how you can support the person who is the target of the abuse. And I've used this myself personally in several cases, and it's worked. So you want to go and you sit or stand next to them, check in there if they're okay, mouth to them, are you okay? They may not speak your language, but obviously body language speaks loudest, especially in a situation like this. You can tell when someone is fearing for their life. Engage them in conversation, but refuse to make eye contact with the person who's doing the attacking, and whether that is verbal or they look like they're going to do something physical. The other thing that works is telling somebody in charge or who is responsible in that particular setting. I'm on a UT call, so it could be a professor, it could be a security guard, it could be a staff member, an administrator. If you're on public transportation, it could be the driver, just depending on where you are, someone who can assess the situation with you. But for the more extreme, if you're not If you don't have any kind of martial arts in your background or any kind of self-defense, call 911. And it's all about making sure that that person who is being targeted feels okay. And then once you leave the situation, if you have to go to an appointment or a class or a meeting, making sure that once you've left, you have the peace of mind that that person will be okay.
Thank you, Alizza.
Sure.
Our next question is directed toward Yujie. What are some strategies and some resources to support faculty in practicing inclusive teaching in their classroom?
Thank you, Lorna. Hi, everyone. This is Yujie Huang. I'm the faculty consultant from Teaching and Learning Innovation. So I think this is a really great question. When we're talking about inclusive teaching, it's really like a dynamic and a collaborative process. But there are some baby steps we can take as a starting point. I think first of all, we can start by actually doing a self-reflection on our own identities and biases. For example, asking yourself, do you have different expectations for students from different groups? How does your social identity shape your experience in your discipline? Or how do you accommodate students with disabilities? So by really being authentic to ourselves, we can start to understand how our perceptions of others and how our experiences can impact our interactions with the students or your teaching experience. Another thing I can think of is it's okay to be overwhelmed. However, we do have some resources at UT can prepare us to conduct inclusive teaching. For example, Teaching and Learning Innovation is a great source of information. The center offers a range of resources and programs and related to inclusive teaching, experiential learning, or service learning that try to engage diverse learners. And this fall, we actually have an inclusive teaching certificate program that's offered by TOI, and which will provide a systematic training related to inclusive teaching. So I would encourage you to check those resources on TOI's website. And lastly, my advice is like, we all have to embrace mistakes. Sometimes incidents happens, and which will create those intensive moments, but we're not perfect. So the bottom line is we learn from those incidents so we can do better next time. Thank you.
And thank you, Yujie. Thank you for those wonderful resources. Our next question, this is directed to Kelly. What resources are available on campus to support students, faculty, and staff who encounter racism and bias?
Thank you, Lorna. This is Kelly Rubin, Associate Dean of Students, and here to talk about a few of the resources. One is everyone on campus has the opportunity to submit a bias incident report. This can be done through a website, bias.utk.edu. And there's also an option to report through the LiveSave app if you've downloaded that from our University Police Department. And folks who are more interested in support without reporting can also get connected with case managers in the Office of the Dean of Students. We can help students get connected to student counseling services. There's also support available within multicultural student life and getting connected with the many student organizations on campus. Employees have access to support through 946 Care, which is provided through the Human Resources Office. There's also an opportunity to report discrimination complaints with the Office of Equity and Diversity. And graduate students, faculties, and staff have an additional option to connect with a confidential resource through the Office of Ombuds Services. And so it's important to note that this process can be overwhelming. There's so many resources available. People sometimes aren't sure the best route to go. And so for people who choose to submit the bias report, we provide support in navigating that process and helping everyone understand the best option for them.
Great, Kelly. It's good to know that there are so many resources available for students, faculty, and staff. Thank you for sharing those.
You're welcome.
Our next question is for you, Doug. How can the campus community support international students as they navigate discrimination associated with COVID-19?
Well, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm Doug Terry from the English Language Institute. I'm an instructor there. I've taught there for about 10 years. So a couple of things we need to keep in mind about international students. I think while many domestic students may experience some, obviously, some cultural adaptation when they come to campus in terms of getting used to the university campus. Our students, and the students I work with almost exclusively, are international students. My students come and they have, a lot more going on than simply adapting to a campus culture. They're also adapting to Knoxville culture and East Tennessee culture. And so there's a whole host of things that they're sort of juggling and contending with when they arrive. And so we need to keep in mind that our students, our international students, are navigating this, this type of cultural distance, regardless of whether there's a COVID-19 crisis or not. In this particular time, obviously we are currently teaching remotely. We're doing meetings remotely. So from the instructor side, from the staff side, we are becoming, I think, more and more step by step, more adept at communicating online. And my hope is that we're learning to communicate more explicitly and more clearly and efficiently. And so these are things that are really, really important right now for our international students for a couple of reasons. Number one, for many of our students, there is their interaction, engagement with people in authority, whether it be an instructor or a staff person or obviously a dean of a college, would be more of a passive nature. It's a sign of, it's more common in their culture to be passive and not to be as directly engaged. And so not only that, but they're also trying to navigate the new culture. And so they tend to group together with those who are like them, linguistically or culturally. So there's a bit of more of a distance, perhaps, for some of our international students than for our domestic students. So clear and explicit communication is very important about, as Kelly Rubin mentioned just now, about the BERT, the Bias Incident Reporting tool there, and other things like that. So they need to know explicitly that this is available to them. They need to know explicitly that it's not okay, it's not acceptable to be targeted by people who are engaging them in a biased or racist way. And they also need to see, I think, the idea they need to see folks like themselves who have navigated this before, whether they be Asian American or other international students who have navigated. And so to that end, I think it's important that we think about different types of messaging, different ways to engage our students, not merely with departmental emails or maybe with a blurb on Tennessee Today, which is great, but also through perhaps a short video about one student's experience and how they navigated an incident, or how they diffused and or navigated and reported an incident of bias or racism. So again, the emphasis here is to really try to bridge that distance between those of us in authority and international students as a whole. And I think the more ways we can do that, if we engage that from multiple ways, that's going to be the most effective tool or the most effective way to reach our international students and to help them as they navigate potential discrimination that may occur.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate all of the support that you're providing our international students as they acclimate to our campus, to our city, and actually to our country.
You're welcome.
Our next question: how can we learn to transform our mindset to actively seek or provide support when facing instances of various types of hate crimes and racism? And this question is directed toward Dr. Che-Sun. And just to provide a little context around this question, Doug, you provided a perfect segue when you talked about that some students from international cultures specifically Asian cultures, may be more passive. And we were talking recently, the planning and the panelists and I, we were talking about they may not feel comfortable disclosing that they have experienced racism. And so how can we transform our mindset to actively seek or provide support when facing instances of various types of crimes and racism?
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. And thanks for the invitation. This is Qi-Sun, an associate professor of adult learning at the Department of Educational Psychology and Counseling of YWCA. So how can we learn to transform our mindset? You know, we learn all the time through all kinds of learning, but not all learning is transformative. And transformative learning happens only when either our habits of mind, you know, prior frame of reference, also fixed assumption, expectations, usually we call it mindsets, are changed, or our points of views, habit, you know, beliefs, attitudes, those are immediate, like a specific feeling, attitude, and value judgment, etc., are altered. So only those happen that transformative learning is, that's what we call transformative, that word transformed. So transformative learning is really needed in this current context, as we can imagine. We need to learn to transform our mindsets so to make them more inclusive, discriminating, open, reflective, and emotionally able to change. So because we want to move towards a new frame of reference that will help us generate new understanding, opinions, and justify our actions and change towards new environment. So transformative learning is an essential part for adult development, but it is even more critical now in cross-cultural context, as Asians, Asian Americans brought with them different social cultural traditions that impact them how to socialize and how to make decisions and what is valued, what is important, especially when facing, you know, disorienting dilemmas and those very kinds of racist incidents. So this is what we can learn to transform during different phases. And here I mentioned the Maslow's 10 phases as a reference for us. Usually when we experiencing disorienting dilemma or life crisis, you know, it's very painful, and it can, depending on, you know, whether you get support or you willingly seek support, it can be really painful, can be very long, can be short, but this is to put us in the context to self-examine. And oftentimes without support, we feel kind of a guilt and shame. It's a very, you know, stressful and can lead to our, you know, mental or physical health problem. So we really need to seek help and support. And through these processes and sometimes, you know, the self-assessment, we kind of look at our social culture, even psychological assumptions. That's where our prior frame of reference. And we recognize there's something, you know, we have to change. It won't work. And oftentimes we realize there are other people maybe, you know, also negotiate similar changes. So then you start a discourse. You know, this can be very critical processes for us. And this is the processes sometimes even somebody simply, you know, say a word to you, say, I care about you, hey, how are you doing? Can really change the dynamic. So this is the process we can seek help, and also we can offer help, support to those people. And this is also, as we move on, you know, there's a way to explore, you know, options for new roles and the relationship and the action. So what's out there? What should I do different so I can get out of this bad situation? So there's also, you know, through discourse, you plan, you know, a course of action. And through this action, of course, there's knowledge and skills and needed, information needed to implement this plan. So there's also, again, support and help will come in. So through this, we build a confidence and self-confidence and competence as well in new role and relationship. So we integrate this new frame of reference in our work, you know, in our life back again. So we must learn to change our mindset going through this painful, disorienting phase individually and collectively. Together, we can actively seek help and receive support to recognize and share these experiences and have critical discourse, explore options, acquire knowledge and necessary information for planning and building the confidence in new role and action we have to take. So we can learn and foster transformative learning by facilitating the process through support, any kinds of support, simply say something, simply provide something to them and have a discourse and role modeling. Those are happening in a variety of ways, but believe they all learn and change the way things should be, so nobody will feel the harm, and together we will resolve this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sung. I like your holistic perspective. Certainly, we want to address those that are facing instances of racism and bias, but also those that are providing support. And hopefully the strategies and the information that is being shared today by our panelists will help to transform our community's mindset. Our next question is to Chef Jiang, who is the only student panelist, and we thank you again for being with us today. As the president of an official Chinese student scholar organization on campus, what measures has your organization taken to help students and scholars during these challenging times?
Thank you, Lorna. Hello, everyone. This is Jiang, the president of the UTK CSSA. Today, I'm very glad to introduce our association and the measures we have taken during this very special time. UTK CSSA is shortened for Chinese Students and Scholars Association at the University of Tennessee. It is a non-profit organization at our campus. All of the Chinese students and scholars who study or work in UTK or Oak Ridge National Laboratory are entitled to membership. As one of the largest Chinese organizations in East Tennessee, CSSA plays an essential role in helping Chinese students and scholars to get involved with the American community. During this very special time, we have taken many measures to beat COVID-19 to help our Chinese friends. For example, we update the COVID-19 case information from the website of Tennessee government and our campus in our WeChat official account every day. And this account was followed by more than 3,000 Chinese people in Knoxville. And then we also buy masks from China and distribute them to our members for free. And also the updating flight information and announcements from the Chinese embassy will also be delivered in our WeChat official account and website. And at the same time, we collect the information of the students who want to go back to China, especially the students who are under 18 years old. And we also send this information to the Chinese embassy. And the reason why we take these measures is that we want to make everyone keep relaxed during this very special time. And I believe we can defeat COVID-19 quickly with everyone working together. And after today's webinar, I will also attach our WeChat group QR code in the resources. Thank you, Lorna.
Thank you so much, Shi. The work that you are doing is wonderful. Thank you for your leadership to support your fellow student scholars, and your work is having an international impact. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
This question, we're gonna go back to Kelly. Kelly, earlier in the conversation, you shared with us resources, and you mentioned the Bias Education Referral Team, we also know as BERT. But could you just talk about it a little bit more? What can people expect when they file a report with BERT?
Yes, thank you, Lorna. Again, this is Kelly Rubin with the Office of the Dean of Students. And I think it's important for people to know that when you file a bias report, you have options to do so anonymously. You can also identify yourself and share with the team, this is information only, I don't want any follow-up or contact. And the other option is to identify yourself and give permission to the Bias Education Referral Team to reach back out to you. And so I think it's important for people to know Those options exist on the website reporting form. If you choose to use the LiveSafe app, it identifies you with your login information. And so if you choose to remain anonymous, the challenge is there might be questions, follow-up questions the team has, or support that they want to provide. We just wouldn't be able to do that. So for people who identify themselves and give the team permission to reach out, they should expect that someone from the team will follow up with them over email, invite them an opportunity to come talk with them. Our number one goal on BERT is to provide support to the people who've experienced the Bias Act. We also take this information to identify trends within the community, and I collaborate with campus partners to develop an appropriate plan to address the incident.
Thank you, Kelly. Well, some of you may be wondering, how can we turn this conversation into action? And here we're going to ask that Alizza would respond to this question. How do we move the conversation around racism and bias from behind the scenes to open conversation between college administrators and business leaders?
Thanks, Lorna. So I can speak to and give you an example of what we have done at YWCA. I think all of us would agree that systemic changes, structural changes in how we operate is what is going to make a longer lasting change wherever we sit, whatever role we play. So when I came to the YWCA in this role as CEO about 2 years ago, the board agreed to reactivate our Racial and Social Justice Committee. And the committee chairs decided, let's advocate for carving out time in our monthly board meetings, maybe not every month, but at least, at the very least, quarterly, and sometimes we're able to do this bi-monthly. Time where we're going to address the topics of diversity and inclusion. And one example of where we've done this is that we asked board members to prepare for a video, a TED Talk that we are going to watch, and I believe this is going to be a resource shared at the end of this panel, that's called From Color Blind to Color Brave. And it's a very easily accessible, I think from a public consumption standpoint, anybody can watch this and it'll make you think, no matter what your skin color is, no matter what your background is. And the goal was for us to have a group discussion. As a staff member, it was my opportunity to really be a fly on the wall for our board members who are community leaders. I have a board of about 30 women, mostly Caucasian, but we do have a small group representing people of color. And it was really eye-opening. These are all people who know each other professionally, but once they had the opportunity to hear how personally some people around the table were affected, either as people who had been discriminated against during their lifetime or who had been bystanders and hadn't done anything about it. And it made people think and rethink, how am I going to do this differently in the business setting, as a nonprofit leader, as someone who cares about nonprofits. So there are small things that we can do from a structural standpoint. I think all of us sit in circles and networks as part of business groups where it might be something, someone might say something, oh, I feel uncomfortable, but I don't know that I can address it. Well, I think everybody can. And I think that the key is to always find out who is going to be that right messenger for your group. Who is the person that everybody, for the most part, listens to and trust? And I think that's key in any environment. And then working with that person of, hey, let's see how we can make small changes so that that becomes part of the culture and environment, whatever group setting you're in.
Thank you, Alizza. And again, we appreciate your participation as our community partner from the YWCA to participate on this panel today. It is our hope that this conversation is just a beginning that hopefully, you know, the campus community and the wider community of Knoxville, leaders and decision makers and administrators can come together to continue this conversation, especially on behalf of our students, international students, our Asian population. When students come to our campus to enroll and they become students at UTK, they also become students of our wider community. So I just want to thank all of the panelists for their participation in this part of the conversation in response to the questions that have been pre-submitted. At this point, the conversation is going to continue. I'm going to pass the mic, if you will, to Janelle and Rachel, and they have been gathering the questions from our audience for our Q&A session. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to serve as your moderator today. Janelle and Rachel, I turn it over to you.
All right. So we have received, first I want to mention that we have 210 participants on the call. So thank you so much for participating. And one of the questions was asked about how many participants. When we were asking you to register, we asked you whether or not you have experienced any incidents. So actually more than 10% of the participants marked yes to that. Of course, we have a percentage that says that they prefer not to answer, but just remember that if you experience something like that, you are not alone. And also another participant asked if we can share some personal experience or some incidents that happened here to make it more a concrete example. And I would just be brave, I guess, you know, share my own experience. So since I moved here before the COVID-19, I haven't actually really experienced anything but the Southern hospitality. But what happened to me was actually about 2 weeks ago when I was on Facebook. And I was returning some messages, and one of the previous neighbors just showed up on my Facebook, said, if you think China is so great, go back to your country. So at that moment, I actually didn't sleep for like a whole week. This still hurts me and haunts me today, knowing that, you know, one of my neighbors who I hang out with, went to party with, and would have such a thought in the mind. But very luckily that some of the other neighbors that I reached out to immediately responded, Rachel, please do not go back to your country because the United States is so much better with you here. So I think one of the advice I want to give is really to reach out to people who can support you in that and say, hey, I've experienced this, can you help me? So that's what I did over there. And then the second thing I did was I was trying to help them change the narrative. So I formed an organization and we started doing things that's positively impacting the community and doing the communication work. So during this time, I would definitely ask you to reach out to different communities. One of the example is CSSA, Chinese Students and Scholars Association, who are here to help. We also have many other student organizations or community groups that can be helpful. So that's one general example of that. Janelle, do you want to do the next question?
Sure. So we have a lot of different questions coming in right now. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in there. First, let me introduce myself because I haven't introduced myself. My name is Janelle Coleman. I'm the Executive Director for Diversity and Engagement. And so I'm here to just basically just kind of share some of the questions here today. And I'm so thankful for all of you being here, both panelists and participants. So going back to the next question, I see a question here from a staff member of the university. If I were to see another staff member, faculty, or student even harassing someone of another culture, of course, after checking on the targeted person, making sure they're okay, what would be the best decision to make after that, even if we or the targeted person does not know who the harassing person is to turn them in? Did everybody get that question, or do I need to rephrase that? Would anyone on the panel like to address that question? So basically, it's a staff member of the university, they see someone being harassed. What would you do in that moment? If you see somebody who's being harassed and you don't know the harasser, but you have checked on the person who is experiencing the racism, what other steps can you take to address the situation?
Janelle, this is Kelly Rubin from the Dean of Students Office. I think it still is worthy of filing a bias incident report. One, because we want to capture the location of where this incident took place, and perhaps it's an area where we could provide general education. If it happened in a residence hall, if it happened in an academic setting, we could contact the dean or department head of that academic program and just really try to identify how to provide education to the people involved, and also including additional support resources to the person who, in the moment of being checked on, they were okay, but they might also benefit from having some follow-up support.
Thank you.
And the
Anyone else?
next question, sorry, any other?
I think, you know, like having a follow-up is definitely necessary, because when the victim is experiencing those such of instance, there is a lot of frustration and there's a lot of anxiety. So I think, you know, just from the caring perspective, we just approach them, know we're there if you need us, you know, like check by email or just a phone call. I think that will make the victim feel like he or she or they are supported and they have somebody to turn to help with that situation.
Just follow Yujie's comment. I think another thing is also, as we think about, you know, Rachel's example, but also this person, you know, you check this person that's being harassed, and then knowing this person definitely will have psychological effect, you know, the pressure, the worry, the fear. So it will be really necessary if you can find somebody that this person trusts or have a similar situation, because a discourse at this point is very necessary, so they feel they're not alone, and together they can learn, and they can, you know, like we talk about transformative learning, they kind of seek out some knowledge, something they do differently, so next time they know how to respond to that, and also have their psychological, you know, the pain kind of shared in a larger, you know, scope. So knowing there are other people doing that has been okay, has been, you know, overcome by doing what and what. So something like that would also be a great approach.
Thank you so much for your answers. Rachel, do you want to jump in on the next question?
So the next question is, how should you respond in the moment if you are personally the victim of the racist act? Particularly, how should you react both during the incident and afterwards? And this is also one of the questions has been, I've been thinking about and dreaming about every day, is like, what should I have reacted? And every time, I don't know if you have the same sentiment, when people were calling out on me, cornering me in the grocery stores and stuff like that, there were 1,000 things I could have said or should have said, but I usually don't react in the moment, because being Asian, the culture, we're kind of like reserved and, you know, just trying to be polite and be nice to everyone. So I would love to hear from all the panelists, what do you think during and after? What are some of the ways to deal with that?
Hi, Alizza here. I would love to answer this if that's all right with you, Rachel.
Yes.
So I know that in doing the work that YWCA does, the reality is changing the mind of the person who is the aggressor right in that moment is really rare. If you are able to do that, kudos to you, and I would love to be able to witness that. But I think at a time when social media platforms allow people to be so emboldened to share anything and everything that is on their mind at any moment of the day, it translates into what happens verbally as well. This can be a fortunate thing, it can be an unfortunate thing, but I know that as someone who, and here I am, I'm Filipino American, and I am leading an organization where we say very boldly in our mission that we eliminate racism. And I will, in a very polite way, people will ask me, well, how are you doing that? How dare you say that you can do that? And so the first couple of times when I had to answer it, it was tough because I got defensive. I used all kinds of jargon. I wanted them to listen to me. I wanted to teach them right there. But what you can do is you can say, and maybe those first few times when you are not comfortable and you go home and you say, oh, here are the 20 things I would have said. That's when you remember, you pick your top 3 so that when you do get into that moment again, you can say, okay, I have it's this type of person that's talking to me. I'm in the grocery store, and right now for self-care purposes, all I'm going to say is, I'm not going to talk to you right now. I am here to do my grocery shopping and walk away. Sometimes it's that simple. Other times you feel like you want to confront it and you want to give the person a long explanation why they're in the wrong. But I think it really depends person to person of what you're comfortable with doing. It took me until after college to get to a place where I felt that I could confront friends, because there'd be friends of friends who would think they're saying something funny, but they'd say it often. And it takes a while. It takes having conversations like these to be able to address it and do it comfortably.
All right. So there's another question directed to Kelly Rubin concerning the BERT reporting. I mean, I have to scroll back up because I just lost it. We get people adding on to the chat. So there's a question regarding BERT and how once a BERT report has been submitted, are there emails or notifications that go out? And I'm not sure if it's just to the person who submitted it or to the campus in general. So could you shed some light on BERT and that process?
Sure, thank you, Janelle. Again, this is Kelly Rubin with the Office of the Dean of Students, and I think it depends on who or what that question is directed at. And so in terms of one example that comes to mind is a student files a report and identifies a staff or faculty member. And so someone on the team would consult with that person's supervisor and share information and address that in a more individual way. And there are other times when an incident has become very public on our campus, and that is when the chancellor will send out an email, or Vice Chancellor Tyvee Smalls, to just announce hate and racism on our campus. So I think it varies case by case.
Thank you so much. We have another question. Oh, go ahead, Rachel. Did you want to jump in?
No, go ahead. The other question you mentioned.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share this question. There's quite a few more. So the other question I have here is for have students reported incidents of racially motivated speech or actions they think are related to COVID xenophobia? And that also may be something that Kelly Rubin can answer to with regard to bias incident reports. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Did you hear the question or do you want me to repeat it?
Okay, I see the question from the chat.
Yes. So the question was related to if students have been reporting racially motivated attacks with the COVID-19.
Okay.
So
far, we didn't receive the reported incidents from the Chinese students or scholars about the racism, and some friends, you can say there is a question is from here. Some people said they are outdoor sports lover, and when they go outside, some people will spit or shout at themselves. And some friends of mine will tell me something like this. And in that case, I think we cannot stop this situation because everyone has different backgrounds. So in that case, I recommend my friends that we have to be safe first And then I think we have to stay home. And when we go outside, we must get together with our friends. And if you are go outside alone, I think it will be very dangerous. And some people, some trans friends also told me that they feel very dangerous when they go outside, when they go to the market or the saving any other places. And some natives people will say some bad words on them. But so I think if they want to go outside to buy something or do some outdoor sports, they had better to stay with their friends to keep safe. Yeah.
And I want to
Thank you.
direct everyone's attention to our UTPD Chief Choi Ling is joining us on this call, and he mentioned a very good point is that it's very important to remember if you're involved in such a situation, feel unsafe, please call UTPD. Though they may not be able to take any legal action at the moment, but with almost every agency mentioned today here and can provide some support and referral.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'll just reiterate the importance of, if you are a student on campus, or if you're a faculty member or staff and you have experienced this on campus, please report it. A lot of things go unreported. I'm a member of BERT myself. We have received some incidents related to COVID-19, and it is very difficult to navigate. Those situations are difficult to navigate, but we won't be able to address them if people don't report. So I just want to also reiterate the importance of reporting these incidents as they happen, because that provides critical information to the institution and to our leadership so that we can address those things. So there's quite a bit more questions here. So I'm going to go ahead and jump on. But before I do that, we're approaching the end of this webinar. It ends at 3:30, and we want to make sure that we honor the time. So I just want to let everybody know that first of all, I just want to continue to thank our panelists for their participation. I appreciate all of you being here. It's an honor for me to work with you. Thank you, Rachel, for partnering with thank you to the Center for Global Engagement and everybody there for partnering with us to do this. This is a wonderful idea. I'm going to let everyone know that the panelists have agreed to stay an additional 10 minutes. So it is 3:25, but just so you know, we will be available to 3:40 to answer these questions. So if you are interested in listening, feel free to stay. If you must go, you are welcome to do that as well. So the next question I see here is a really good question. It says, what is it in the higher education culture that will help with anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion? And what will hurt it? Would somebody be willing to answer that question? It's a really deep question there. So.
I'll start just to mention that, again, I think just circling back to what Kelly's been talking about, and also Janelle, what you just mentioned about the importance of reporting these incidents through BERT. I think that's key, is that we not, one of the things that could be hurtful about higher education culture is that we often can surround ourselves with lots of folks who agree with us on this issue, that that this is not to be tolerated and this needs to be addressed directly when it happens. And so we need to be aware that though that there are plenty of folks, as we can see on the news every night or every afternoon, whenever you're accessing your news, that there are plenty of folks who don't feel the same way. And so it's important that we encourage and support, and that's where the support comes in, as Yujie was saying, to support and to follow up with people after they've navigated an incident, and to encourage them to report it, or to simply to have some dialogue about it, so it doesn't just disappear from their experience, or from the experience that we have as colleagues, or as if it's a student as an instructor and student relationship. So again, I think that we need the support we provide is not merely just, as you said, Janelle, not merely just to support the individual student, but to create a climate that's more aware and more sensitive to these issues, in particular here with anti-Asian American, anti-Asian sentiments that are cropping up in this time.
I just like to follow what Dax mentioned about the environment building. I think it's very important, and knowing the role modeling and also the culture in higher ed or any campus is really created by all of us. What the good example or the bad example, thinking our top leaders using China virus or Wuhan virus, and the effect immediately spread without even advertising. So similarly, if we do, but in a positive way, we can create a culture that support understanding this is the value here on this campus, in this local community. We don't allow. I think what we're doing today is really a great example. And I'm sure the leaders on campus will continuously, using every way they can to protect not just so-called the current targeted risk for this instance, but as well the whole community of building a culture. So everyone, like I think Dr. Small mentioned this early on. So everyone on this campus is valued. So the culture, I think, is really important for all of us. What we value, what kinds of policy we have. So from small things to big things. So the role modeling from top down, but also from grass, we all understand in this campus, nothing small or this is not acceptable. I think that message is very important in building the culture.
Absolutely.
And I want to jump into, there are actually a couple of questions related to that. It was more about maybe for international students support, although many of the international students have returned to their home countries, but many are still here. So most of the people here, they feel safe being in their environment, but they're also very bored. So are there any kind of a support, more concrete examples of the things that we can do for this community to be more engaged?
Yes, well, I mean, I can speak to that directly, at least during this time, during social distancing, social isolation, whatever moniker you want to put on that. During this time, it's been difficult, because I think I have a sense that domestic students as well have been bored, have been, sort of going stir crazy. But yes, my international students that I've worked with, that I've been teaching, have felt, the need they're just feeling stir crazy, and they have gone, to the market and those kinds of things. We organized a social distancing edition of going to Baxter Gardens. So that was fun. Had one student show up, but that was perfect for social distancing edition, and it actually was a Chinese student, and so those are little steps we can take, but it comes through, that just underscores that it comes to relationship. We have to be, if we're not able, if you're an instructor of a class full of 50 students, if you're not able to be personally engaged in all of your students, that's where, again, this multiple ways of contact, multiple ways to engage your class setting in terms of, support, offering support, and giving, and again, if you're in a department that's not, I'm in the Center for Global Engagement, but if you're not in that department, if you're in an academic department, still advertising the types of things types of programming that happens at the International House, or every so often, advertising the Programs Abroad office, just getting our international students the sense that there are places to go on campus where they have support. There are places they can go to where they can find folks who have navigated situations that they may find themselves in is very key. In terms of this current environment, though, like I said, Rachel's question about being bored, I happen to have a relationship with these students, and so I was able to set up that trip. But I'm not suggesting everyone go out and just congregate in large groups right now. But it's difficult. I also, as an instructor, I do one-on-one. Those instructors who are on the call right now know about breakout rooms, probably with Zoom. So I do one-on-one breakout rooms just to talk with certain students that I feel are not engaging, don't seem to be engaging the class time. That way I can kind of check in with them and see what's going on. And you can also tell, by the way, when certain students never show their face, they stop video for like half an hour straight, and you're like, what's going on with that student over there? They're just dark screen. So I think for any instructor right now in a Zoom environment, although I know the semester is ending, but for any instructor, as we move forward into the summer, that's something to be aware of as well.
So those are great. Go ahead, Rachel.
No, go ahead, please.
So those are great examples, Doug. So I have one to contribute. Of course, this example is not mine, so I learned it. So recently I participated in a webinar talking about how to mentor students. And there is one faculty shared one activity that could engage students. It's like she hosted like a karaoke, like through the Zoom, where engage students in a fun way, because, students had a lot of online classes to take. So she thought it was really, a success to engage students in a fun way after, during those stressful time. So I just
send me that link. I'd like to look at that. Awesome. Seriously,
all right,
being very serious.
I think
we still have we got 7 questions left. We have
so let's take a look at, I think this is a very important question, is that a couple of the repeating ones is, how could we sometimes know what is surely a harassment, since the cultural difference might be there. Also, the question is that I found from news, given the cultural political atmosphere and Sino-US relations, how can we make sure that we're not overreacting to a healthy public debate regarding COVID-19? So the bottom line, the question is that where do we draw the line between the public debate and apparent nonsense racist or pure racial harassment? Where do we draw the line?
I'll get started. I think anybody else can jump in. But I think first we have to try to analyze the context, who you're talking with, what their purpose. So you will see that, the initial diagnosis, is that just trying to have a point of view, or is a personal attack just have some emotional, you can feel it after a couple of interactions. So I think you want to make sure you understand that and then go from there, whether you stop the conversation or you want to engage. But still, public debate, especially at this very sensitive time, may not be a good idea unless you know this person. For example, if you're doing academic debate discussion, that's very different. But if you know this person or you don't know this person, you have no clue about this background, but you notice the emotional effect is behind it already. So I think you probably want to be cautious.
Thank you so much.
And a related question is, like Alizza said, social media has emboldened a lot of people to say pretty much whatever they're thinking, but the racism and bias towards the people of Asian descendants has also been reinforced by the media outlets and some of the politicians. So as a student and Asian community member, what can we do to help our friends and neighbors of Asian descendants, especially international students, feel supported and safe when people with a lot of influence in our society are using COVID-19 to stir up hate against them? I think this is a really tough question.
I don't mind doing a part 2 follow-up to that. So I think, if everybody on this call, and you said, Rachel, there are over 200 people, I think it's easy for us to say, whoop, I can check it off my list. I participated in this anti-racism call. I'm good for the month of April. Not saying everybody does that, but just think if everybody followed up Like if you just follow up, and right now, since virtual, our life is virtual right now. Going back, and this sounds so old school, but a phone call, or actually having some kind of interaction with somebody. So even if you're doing a FaceTime or something with somebody, I think makes a huge difference. To verbally hear someone say, I hear you, I've been there, let's talk about it. Since everything, we're typing so much. So going back to that, I think is really critical for people for the self-care concept. But I think I don't know that there's a magic ball answer or a crystal ball answer for that question. Sometimes you have to turn off the social media. Sometimes you do have to turn off the news. But I think, as many of us have said and agree, is that and you've got a whole panel here. You've got some individuals on this call. Reach out to us. We're happy to chat. I know I am. Not saying that I have a ton of time on my hands. I have 2 kids, but still, I'm happy to engage with anybody. And I know in our organization would as well.
And I'll also add to, we're gonna definitely think about ways to follow up from this discussion. And only this will be the last conversation that we'll be having. So we will be alerting everybody about future events like this. So all of you that have signed up to attend today, we will definitely be alerting you for future events. We do ask as well, we have a survey that's coming out tomorrow. So please be sure to fill out that survey and give us your feedback, but also share with us some ideas for future events like this. I'm going to go ahead and ask a couple other questions. We literally have like 1 minute left. So I'm going to, there's questions about microaggressions. We talked about, racism. And so I think, with microaggressions, if you get too many of them, become macroaggressions after a while. And so I think the same steps apply as they pertain to, racism, making sure that you, in particular, just interrogate and sometimes you might want to interrogate, sometimes it just depends on how you want to address it and how you feel most comfortable. So I think Lisa's answer to that question was great. This question here, there's a lot of questions about supporting students that are not in the same environment. So a lot of our staff and instructors are not in the same environment as our students. Our students are in various communities. There have been a few questions around this. How do you all, very quickly, 10-second response, how do you think we should address those needs of those students, even from a distance?
Janelle, this is Kelly from the Office of the Dean of Students. And so wanting people to know that 974 HELP is still available 24 hours a day. So that phone is still being answered 24 hours a day. There's an online referral form that faculty and staff could fill out. And that is for students who need additional support. And so we are meeting with students by phone call and Zoom meetings, as is the counseling center. So if there's a longer term need for therapy, we can help students get connected there as well.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.
Janelle, there's a question here about laws. Are we going to be able to quickly get a
go ahead
on that?
quickly.
Well, I want to know what Kelly might say, or I don't have the specific laws or statutes in front of me, but does someone on the panel, I think that was probably a student that asked that question. It sounded like a student may have asked that question about what laws are on the books about discrimination. It sounded like it may have been a student who was not as aware of maybe the legal.
Anybody have an answer to that?
Climate.
I'll just quickly go ahead and say, we have an Office of Equity and Diversity that addresses compliance issues. So I would encourage whoever asked that question to seek out, go to oed.utk.edu, and we can share that resource as well. They have some information about laws and regulations regarding discrimination, harassment, and definitions for those terms as well. I think it's important to inform ourselves about those particular resources. So I would highly recommend seeking out that information from equity and diversity in terms of the legal ramifications. The other side of that, keep in mind, we do have free speech. And so there is a fine line, as you all know, between hate speech and free speech. PEN America, PEN America has some wonderful resources around the line between hate speech and free speech, and helping people understand and differentiate the differences between those things. So I would just recommend checking out those two resources for that information.
Janelle, I would also add that if it was a graduate student, faculty, or staff member, they have access to Ombud services, which is confidential. And so that is a person that you can speak to and talk about options and other opportunities without fear of ramifications.
I'd just like to add a couple of other observations. I think either for students, especially international students, Asian American Asian students, and also faculty too, and myself, I've been trying to learn all the resources, knowing that we're totally in a different culture. Depending on how long you have been here, you have been transplanted to this new culture, and your reaction or your feeling will be different. The longer you stay here, maybe the more you learn. But I think I would encourage all of us to consciously learn, like we talk about the transformative learning. We have to transform our mindset. This culture is different in many ways. And their resources, the more you know, the more you get protected and support you. Oftentimes, there's something we don't feel very comfortable. For example, counseling. In our culture, thinking, well, I'm not sick, so to speak. So that kinds of services may not really work well. However, I think being in this culture the longer, we have to adapt to, but also understand there are some resources can really help us. So in terms of law, in terms of regulation, in terms of either inside of university or outside in the society, something that can help you. So I think, those kind of learning should be part of us as we integrated with our, the international globalization, whether you go back or stay here. Now the globalization enabled all the borderless, everything is borderless. So we have to increase our cultural competency, including understanding the law, the whatever, those policies, the services, whether they're different or not. And you have to understand something that can be beneficial in the future. So I just want to share that from my own, personal experiences.
And I would just add that, during those difficult times, we all need those patience, a little bit empathy for each other so we can take care of ourselves and take care of the person around us.
All right, well.
One last thing, this is not end of the world. We see there in the history in this country, this is an immigrant country, think about Martin Luther King, the great example, and how long he has been fighting, has been, using the education to the movement, social movement. So I think this is just another type of format. So we got to learn, and together, I think, eventually, still society is very different, especially there are some political, social, economic elements bring in, but in educational setting, this is our responsibility to be a successful learner. So we have to learn and make difference. We have to change the status quo that is not right for us to do. So we can't just learn something, okay, find a job. Now you see everything is integrated. If you can't live in an environment that is safe enough, that has right, has happiness, people talk about, they can't even go outside. So then no matter how expertise you have, you can't use them. Your life is ruined. So I think it's everybody's benefit, everybody's responsibility to learn how to make change towards a social justice, a justice society.
Thank you so much for that wonderful comment. I think that is a great note for us to end today. Again, thank you all for participating. We have 90 participants left. You all hung on to the very end, and we really appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. As I mentioned earlier, there will be a survey that will go out to everyone. So please be sure to share your comments, your feedback, and your ideas for future events. I look forward to reading those. And again, thank you for attending, and thank you panelists. Thank you Gretchen and Tyvee and Rachel especially, whose idea this was to put this together. I just want to publicly acknowledge that. And I wish you all a wonderful rest of the day.